Ethan D. Bryan, welcome to the Bookshelf Conversation.
I am honored to be here with you. I've been looking forward to it.
The premise of the book, A Year of Playing Catch, fascinates me because, unfortunately, because of COVID, uh, even before COVID, I retired from uh, playing competitive softball, uh, and I had a car accident that kept me out of action for a number of months. So the idea of playing catch every day for a year is fascinating. Where did this idea come from?
My daughters. It is completely my daughters, and I thank them often. But it was really my youngest daughter is an artist, and for Christmas, she gave me a ball that just said, "Dad, want to play catch on it." And I had it sitting on my writing desk on New Year's Day, and was just kind of in that fog, that melancholy after surviving the stress of the holiday season. And I saw that ball on my shelf, and there was no um, forethought really given to it. I saw it, and I just shouted out to her. I said, "Hey, Sophie, do you want to play catch?" And as you know, we clarified what that meant. It meant outside. It meant trying to find a baseball field. Well, on that day, it was 1 degree, and we found a local baseball park that was open, and so we put on all these layers and went and played catch. And that same afternoon, my oldest daughter said she thought playing catch sounded fun, so we stepped in the backyard. And so on January 1st, 2018, we're sitting at the table just having family dinner, and they said, "Dad, what would happen if you played catch every day for a year?" And in my memory, it's so clear. I laughed. That was my response. Was I was like, what would happen is I would need surgery. This is what would happen. And that was my honest response. I have had some pretty major surgeries. I don't ever want to experience that again. And um, they were generous and encouraging to say, you should try it. And so the whole year was inspired by them, and they encouraged it. And I am still learning because of it. And so I tell them thank you all the time.
How old were your daughters at the time?
At the time, 17 and 13.
Oh, now I just want to get some parameters down. When you say you went to the ballpark, a
Yeah.
field, what were your rules for what constitutes? And I always thought the expression "a game of catch" was kind of
Yeah, yeah.
odd because is it a game? There you don't keep score. You
No
know,
winners, no losers.
playing catch, yes. Playing a game of catch is another story. But yeah, what were your parameters for what would count? Is there a time definition, a number of throws? Did you have to be on a field? You couldn't just go out on the
Yeah,
street or in the front yard, whatever.
it's funny. Basically, I had worked on another project, America at the Seams with Baseball Seams Company. And through that, I interviewed the GM of the now Guardians, uh, Mike Chernoff, and he and his dad meet for catch every month. And their definition was 25 throws.
Mhm.
And so I had that in the back of my mind, and we stepped out on the field. Sophie and I did, and the conversation was like, "Well, I remember this conversation I had 25 throws," and she said something along, "Well, let's see if we can do 30." And so she and I did 30, and by that time it was just so cold, and so parameters, usually just a ball and a glove and 25-ish throws, 30 throws, and but what happens is, after you start making those few throws, what you thought was going to take just a couple minutes, it grows. And for doing it for years, the hardest part is coming to a satisfying stop. Is stopping.
That's right. How do you say, okay, that's enough? I mean,
Yeah.
25 to me does not seem like a whole lot.
No, no,
But
it really
again,
is.
it's like the weather, the temperature might be 30 degrees, but then you take into account the wind chill factor, and that changes the dynamics. So,
Yeah.
25 throws in 0-degree weather is not the same as 25 throws in 70-degree weather.
Exactly.
So how did you go about, I mean, you could have easily have played catch with your daughter, your neighbor, your buddies every day, but that wasn't what you wanted to do. You expanded it. How did you decide who to ask, where to go? Talk about that.
It really is. I mean, it's like chasing windmills. I mean, I really didn't know what I was doing. It was an exercise in naive ignorance. And so on that January 1st, I really don't know why I did it, but for some reason I put a picture, I put it on an old blog that is horrible that I designed through WordPress and it looked awful. And I put the pictures, I said January 1st, Happy New Year, warm smiles, something like that. And so I did it. And then so the next day they're like, well, you're gonna play catch today, right? I was like, yeah, sure. So I put it on for 2 days. And then a friend was in town from Kansas City. He said, hey, I'm in town and I brought my glove just in case you want to play catch. I'm like, well, sure, yeah. And what happened was the three people who happened to read my blog at the right time said yes and said yes and said yes. And then it was really just the snowballing of social media. I was one of my responsibilities as dad was to drive my daughters to school, and I was waking up early, and I saw the newscaster, and I don't know if he made a mention of playing baseball or what it was, but for some reason, I sent him a note. It was on the on January 4th, which was my wedding anniversary. I said, so I think I'm going to be playing catch every day. Would you have any interest? And he's like, when? And I was like, I literally have no one scheduled for the rest of the year. And he said, well, let me turn it into a news story. So he brings his videographer, and it went nuts. It people start, and so when you come to Florida, let me know. When you come to Chicago, I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know what I'm doing. And so after about 2 weeks of trying to figure out what I was doing, I decided to jump in with everything and go make a whole bunch of new friends and take gloves all over the country. It was a blast.
That's very sweet. How did you decide? Hmm, I mean, there are a lot of decisions to be made.
Yeah.
When did you decide that you were going to make a book out of this?
um, the book came on day, it was like 206 or 207, right around there. My dad and I received an invitation to go to the Field of Dreams. And so we went up there and we met with a sports writer and an 80-year-old guy who still plays baseball every summer. He still pitched in the Roy Hobbs. And so we met up there for a game of catch. Stan. And on the way home, there is another podcaster, the Moonlight Graham podcast. And we connected with him. And he said, so, you know how in the movie The Field of Dreams and James Earl Jones getting ready to walk out into the corn, he gets his invitation, he says, you are going to write about this, aren't you? And he turns around and says, well, it's what I do. And so on the podcast, he said, you are going to write about this, aren't you? And I said, all right, I will officially make the promise. If I complete the entire year, I'll write about it. And that's when I started thinking, all right, what in the world have I gotten myself into?
So you traveled widely to
Yeah,
accomplish this. You met with a great many people. Some of the stories here are very inspirational. You met with people who were ill, people who
yeah.
had disabilities, uh, all sorts of people. I know it's hard to pick, but if you had to pick one, what was your best experience and what was your worst experience?
Ooh. Well, the worst experience, that's easy. There weren't any. It, and and I can honestly say there were days I was meeting complete strangers, And I was worrying, what's this going to be like? I don't know this person at all, and have that kind of those anxieties. And by the time it was over, we're laughing and we're sharing emails and phone numbers and saying, "Well, I'm looking forward to catching up with you later." And so there were no worse experiences. Um, Today, the one that stands out, and it's probably because I'm wearing the Monarchs hat. It was about August or September. I got to go to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and tour it with the former players of the All American Girls Professional Baseball League. So I was there with Shirley, and I was there. I mean, there were 60 of them in the league who were walking through that museum together. And have you been to that museum?
I have not.
Oh, top of your bucket list. It is incredible. And the president, Bob Kendrick, he was telling stories. And I've met Bob on multiple occasions, and he's just the most gracious host. He's a phenomenal storyteller. And you come to the end of the museum. At the end of the museum is it's the oh my gosh, I forget what they call it. The hall of what do they call it? They have bronze statues, life-size statues of the premier Negro Leagues players at that position. So you got on the mound, you got Satchel Paige. Behind you got Josh Gibson catching, Cool Papa Bell, and I got to connect with two former players in the All American Girls Professional Baseball League at the Negro Leagues Baseball Hall of Fame, and to hear the ladies say these stories are our stories too about being shut out of baseball because of how we were who we are because we're girls, and we cared about the game so much that we found out a way to play anyway.
Now you traveled. It's been a while since I played, and shortly before I stopped playing, I had to buy a new glove because the glove I had had for many years finally broke down, and the company, the sporting goods store, you don't find too many mom and pop sporting goods stores anymore around
Yeah.
here anyway. And so the one that I would have brought it to fix it wasn't there anymore. So I broke down, bought a new glove. It's still not broken in because I stopped playing and then all these other things happened. But I still keep it in the car all the time, just in case. You
Yeah.
never know. Now you traveled around with a backpack of gloves,
Yeah.
uh, and you note that a baseball glove is probably one of the most personal pieces of sports equipment a person can have, but you didn't mind sharing it when
Yeah.
the need arose.
Oh, not at all. I was delighted. One of the neat things was how many people that I got the chance to play catch with who had never put on a glove before and experienced that. And so I had my glove for the Wilson Glove Company sent me a brand new one from spring training. And so I used that for a large part of the year, ended up giving it away to a high school ball player at the end of the year. Then I had mine from high school. I had dad's glove, I had my wife's glove, and man, a couple others. I since given a couple of them away. But just keep being able to provide someone that experience and let them sense it. And what's neat is how many people would respond afterwards. Hey, I found my glove, or I found my dad's glove, or I went out and bought my own just so I could have one for when we meet again. It's just, and it's kind of fueled what I'm doing now is looking for opportunities to put gloves on the hands of kids who need them, and to get people of all ages playing catch.
I'm curious, what kind of glove did your dad have?
1970 Wilson Mattia signature model. It's actually in my bedroom right now. We
1970.
just
I mean, to me that's like almost modern, you know. When I'm sorry, but when I hear people talk about their dads, maybe because of my age, if my dad had been a ball player, which he was definitely was not, so his
yeah,
glove would have been like from the 1930s, 40s, the big pillow
yeah,
gloves. Uh,
yep. Well,
so,
I've got a 1950s model, but my dad didn't play ball growing up. He played football. And so he bought this glove after my parents were married to play church league softball. And he was a pitcher. He said it
Uh,
saved his teeth a couple times.
I want to talk about switch gears a little bit and talk about
Sure.
the publishing aspect of the book.
Yeah.
How did you find a publisher?
Oh my gosh. So when I lived in Kansas City, I'd done some curriculum writing, some published some articles, and I had a friend who had connections to a publisher, and so I contacted him, said, I think I have a book that I need an agent for. Do you have any? Do you are you an agent? Do you have any agent recommendations? And he said, this is the only recommendation I have. A friend named Mark. So I sent Mark an email, tried to explain a little about who I am, what I've done, and the beginning of the email said something like, "Well, I'm not a baseball fan." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay." And I really thought that was the end of the email. He said, "But I like the samples you sent me, so let me keep talking." And he sent it to contact that he had at Zondervan, and somehow this is the part of the story I always get kind of confused. It went to the wrong person, or went to it was on a slush pile, a rejected slush pile, and another guy picked it up, said, "I want to run with this project." And so there's a whole lot of serendipity
Mhm.
in it finding a home. And then once it found a home, they said, "Well, we're not going to publish this till," I think the initial publication was either, I think it was spring of 2021, maybe. And they said, "Well, we're going to move it up 6 months," and that's now fall of 2020. And then COVID happened and made all that kind of fun and interesting. They basically said I got kind of the short end of the straw on a publication date, but it's out there, and I'm proud of it. So
So that is one of the unfortunate things about the pandemic is that it prevented a lot of authors from making tours and appearances, and certainly a book like this, I can readily imagine it being very popular with speaking to audiences and bookstores and whatnot. Uh, so yeah, that's a shame. But you mentioned that your contact wasn't a baseball fan. You hear about baseball movies that they're not about baseball. And this
yeah,
book, while it is about baseball, seems like so much more than that. It's more a connection of people and personalities rather than just a baseball book.
yep. And I think that's I was really surprised. I mean, I think I was giddy for a week when I got the email or the note that said that it had been chosen as a finalist for the Casey Award. And I was like, "Are you kidding? Really? This is enough of a baseball book that it got put." And then of course, and I can't even remember off the top of my head who won that year. And I was like, "Oh yeah, it was the history of baseball." I just forgot the title. I was like, "Oh, of course he deserves to win. That's a fantastic book." But um, one of the things I've learned through this catch playing journey uh, is how baseball really just brings people together. I mean, I guess that's really what all sports do. Um, but I was watching the Chiefs this last week with mom and dad, and there was very little meaningful conversation happening other than, "Oh, please catch this," or "tackle him," or anything like that. Um, but when you're in the stands, you get a chance to visit with those near you, whether you know them or not, whether it's the little kid behind you or the couple sitting next to you. When you're on the field, you're having conversations, yes, about the game, but also sharing life with your teammates, and it really is. And then after the game, once the game is over, um, from my experience, there's no real animosity, win or lose, towards your opponents. You're like, the game is over. This was a good game. Now let's go have fun together. And so that's really what I tried to express in the book is this is something about bringing people together.
That's one of the things I never understood with the complaints about the baseball games being too long. Uh, I compare it to other sports, and you go to a football game or a hockey game or basketball game, and, people are screaming their lungs out. You go to a baseball game in the middle of the summer because there's so many more baseball games than any of the other sports, uh, and there are long periods of quietude, and that for me that's the most enjoyable to sit there in relative quiet,
Yeah.
because
Now, yeah,
the attendances are usually, because there's so many games, you're the same, might be half full or a third full or a quarter full, and it's relatively quiet. And for me, that that's what I enjoy. It's just like sitting in the warm. It's very cliche. Sitting in the warm
yeah,
weather amongst friends, having a beer, just relaxing without the do or die situation that you have in some of these other sports.
yeah. We Dad and I went to a game. I guess it was 2 years ago. I'm trying to think about it. Maybe it was last year. This is a local college team, Missouri State University, uh, looking for a way to get into the postseason, and they scored 10 runs in the first 2 innings, 4 or 5 home runs. It was incredible game, and then all of a sudden, we both had the realization: one, this game isn't over, and two, we spent 2 hours and we're still in the third inning. Um, and Mom had already said dinner's going to be on the table at X and X time, and so both of us knew we didn't. Well, you didn't want to be late for Mom's cooking, but you don't want to risk being late for Mom's cooking. um, and so you keeping your eye on that. um, but then, once all the scoring had done, and the game fell into the more the typical back and forth rhythm. I'm at a ballpark with my dad, and we're just having fun. And it's just, you're away from the screens, you're away from the pressing stresses of life. I'm able to relax and breathe, and that's so good for us.
And at the risk of being cliche again, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
We've been talking with Ethan D. Bryan, author of A Year of Playing Catch: What a Simple Daily Experience Taught Me About Life. Ethan, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.